Page 103. Life in the Order. In spite of the absence of vows of adherence, in spite of there being no declaration of acceptance of poverty, chastity, and obedience, yet these ideas, summed up in the 10 precepts, impregnated the order. Poverty was manifested in the possession of only 8 belongings, bracket, the 3 robes, comma, the alms bowl, comma, razor, comma, needle, footnote 121, comma, girdle, page 104, and water strainer, bracket closes, all of them the bare necessities of livelihood, but known by entrants to be henceforth their only legitimate belongings. Chastity was inculcated by the major precepts of morality and obedience by the discipline of the order. For if an almswoman could not obey the precepts, she was punished. Para. Of all the almswoman's possessions, the 3 robes were decidedly the most cumbrous. The necessary care bestowed upon them, far more than the washing of pots and pans, throws her into the light of a domestic worker. Since she was allowed a needle, one of the 8 possessions, if the robe were torn, presumably like the almsmen, she could use, quote, slips of cloth inserted bolt-like to hold a torn robe together, comma, patches and darns, comma, and small pieces of cloth sewn on by way of marking, comma, or of strengthening the robes, unquote, stop, footnote 122. And of greater importance still, the almswoman washed and dyed her own clothes. Yet this was practically the full extent to which she might carry washing operations. Para. There is no suggestion that one or several almswomen ever washed for the Sangha as a whole. Each almswoman washed her own 3 robes. Hence, the distribution of labor was perfectly fair, and hence no one almswoman had so much domestic work heaped upon her, or was employed solely for that purpose, as to leave her neither the requisite time nor energy to undertake more important duties. This plan also kept before each almswoman her responsibility for the care of her personal possessions. It also kept before her the responsibility for her share of the care of communal possessions. For after use, each one was, for example, supposed to wash the household overalls, the avastha vichara, which were common property, before handing them on. Footnote 123, para. The 3 robes over which each almswoman had proprietary rights were long and loose and were symbolical of the asexuality of the monastic life. They consisted of the cloak or toga, T-O-G-A, comma, the chivara, and 2 others. Footnote 124. Of these, the upper or outer robe was called the Uttara Sangha, and the lower or inner, the Antara Vasaka. The 3 together were called the Tichivara. They were the same for the almswomen as for the almsmen, footnote 125, and are the constantly mentioned yellow robes, bracket, Kasava Bhattam, bracket closes, or the patchwork cloth, bracket, Bhinna Pata, bracket closes, footnote 126. No flowers or cobra's head should be worked on them. Footnote 127. The uniformity of the color was only flecked by the diversity introduced by the dyes, for the alms people were forbidden to wear robes that were, quote, all of a blue, light yellow, crimson, black, brownish yellow, or dark yellow color. Unquote, stop. Footnote 128. But the materials of which the robes could be made were of 6 different kinds. Footnote 129. Page 105, para. In addition to the Tichivara, the almswomen appear sometimes to have worn a wrapping cloak, the Tharana Pavarana, footnote 130. It was large enough for 2 to share, but they were forbidden to do this. Footnote 131. In the same way, although they were allowed to use a half divan, footnote 132, they were forbidden to sleep 2 together on one couch. Footnote 133. The laity having complained that this resembled the conduct of the women of the world, bracket, gihikama, bhoginia, literally enjoyers of the senses, bracket closes, stop. Presumably, the intention was also to discourage too strong an affection from springing up between any 2 of them. Personal ties might prove to be a hindrance to leading the higher life. Hence, chances for forming them had to be reduced wherever it was possible. Para. Almswomen had also to wear a bodice, the Sankachika. Samkachika, described in the old commentary as coming from below the collarbone to above the navel for the purpose of hiding the breast. At least they should wear it when they went into the villages. Para. The gift of robes was often made by the pious lay people, and by inference it would seem that almswomen might receive gifts of robes from almsmen relatives and have robes made up for them by almsmen relatives or at their instigation. Footnote 134, para. The Sanghas also acquired robes by the death of one of their members. Para. It came to be forbidden for an almswoman to wear a loincloth, sanghani. Footnote 135. They were evidently expected to wear their clothes securely without its aid, and to be different in all the details of dress from the women of the world. But they continued to be allowed to wear a girdle, bracket, kaya bandhana, bracket closes, another symbolical article of dress, if it conformed to a prescribed and modified style. The rules that were drawn up were all monastic in character, their intention being to promote the simple ascetic life. In order to achieve this end, the natural desires of the women to adorn themselves from the primitive means at their disposal had to be quelled. The tongues of the world, all too ready to wag on the slightest provocation, had also to be quelled. Para. Unlike the women of the world in almost every item of their apparel, unlike them too in being covered from the waist up, footnote 136, the almswomen tried to imitate them in wearing women's ornaments until this also was forbidden. Footnote 137, page 106. The section ends here. Page 106 notes. Page 109, 121, Jain recluses must not possess a needle or anything made of metal. Sinclair Stevenson, Heart of Jainism, Oxford, 1915, page 226. 122 MV, Roman 8, 14, 2. 123 V, Roman 4, P, 303. 124. Rice Davidson Steed Dictionary, Santa Rutarina, with an inner and outer garment, cf. V. Roman 4, 281. 125. One of the armsmen's robes was also called the Sanghati. 126. V, Roman 4, page 214, semicolon, and CV, Roman 10, 10, 4. 127. CV, X, 10, 4. 128. Ibid. 129. V, I, PP, 58, 96, 281, Khama, bracket, linen cloth, bracket closes, Kappasika, bracket cotton, bracket closes, Kosia, bracket silk, bracket closes, Kambala, bracket woolen, bracket closes, Sana and Bhanga, bracket coarse hempen cloth, bracket closes. 130. V, Roman 4, page 289. 131. Ibid. 132. CV, X, 27, 2, note 2, quote, probably a cushion, unquote, stop. 133. V, Roman 4, page 288. 134. Pachitya Dhamma, 26. 135. Rice Davidson Steeds, translation, dictionary. The old commentary describes it as something which goes about the hips, HIPS, but this might be a petticoat, V, Roman 4, P, 339 FF. 136. Dialogues, 1, P, stop 130, note 1. 137. V, Roman 4, page 340, CF. CV, V, 2, 1, where ornaments are forbidden to the armsmen. Back of this page is blank. Next page, section 2, women and the economy. Back of this page blank. Next page, page 113. Proprietary rights of women in ancient India, N. Bhattacharya, read in the next file. Women in early Indian societies, page 113. Proprietary rights of women in ancient India, N. Bhattacharya. There has been no dearth of work on Sri Dhana or, quote, woman's, unquote, property. I repeat, quote, woman's property, unquote, in India, written from a purely legalistic point of view since the establishment of the East India Company's rule in India. William Hickey, Hickey, who came to Calcutta as a legal practitioner during the time of Warren Hastings, observed that the Indians were impressed by the British system of the administration of justice, and that the ever-increasing lawsuits offered a wide scope of earning to the European legal practitioners who came to seek their fortune in this country. It was for their convenience that need was felt to compose treatises on Hindu and Muslim laws. The first work of this kind was a code of the Gentoo, Gentoo law, which was an English rendering of Vivadarnava Setu, compiled under the direction of Warren Hastings by a team of Brahmana legal experts done by N.B. Halhed, Halhed, and published in the year 1776. The first authoritative work on Hindu law was H. T. Colebrook's Colebrooke', a digest of Hindu law on contracts and succession, with a commentary by Jagannath Torkopanchanon, which was published in 4 volumes from Calcutta in 1797-98. This work contains, with other aspects of Hindu law, sections on Stridhana. In the list of the earlier publications in the Bibliotheca Indica series, ancient legal texts occupied a leading position. It was probably due to the fact that the European legal practitioners, as well as their Indian counterparts, were required to know the basic contents of the Dharmashastras and their commentaries, frankly, for their professional interest. Para. Among the 19th century major publications of legal treatises dealing with Sridhana as well, mention may be made of Thomas Strange's Strange's Hindu Law, which was published as early as in 1830. The Digest of Hindu Law, written by West and Buehler, Buehler, and published in 1867-9, was also a landmark in modern legal literature of India. But the most authoritative work was Sir Guru Das, Guru Das Banerjee's, Bannerjee's Hindu Law of Marriage and Stridhana, which was originally published in 1878, page 114, and had undergone numerous editions, as had been in the case of J.D. Mayne's, Mayne', a treatise on Hindu law and usage, another important legal publication of the 19th century. Rao Sahib V. N. Mandlik's, Mandlik', Hindu Law, which was published in 1880, had also been a standard work for many years. The Tagore Law lectures instituted by the University of Calcutta were instrumental in bringing out a good number of legal publications. Among these, the lectures on the outlines of the history of Hindu law of partition, inheritance and adoption, as contained in original Sanskrit treatises, which were delivered in 1885 by G. Jolly, Jolly, came out in a book form in 1888. Next to the work of Sir Gurudas Banerjee, it has been the most useful work on Stridhana. Another work of Jolly is also important for our purpose. It was written in German and published in 1896 from Strasbourg under the title Recht, R-E-C-H-T, und, U-N-D, Sitte, S-I-T-T-E, which was subsequently rendered into English by B.K. Ghosh and published from Calcutta in 1928 under the title Hindu Law and Custom. Another important work having bearing on our subject was G.C. Sarkar's Hindu Law of Adoption, which was published in 1891. In the present century, there has been a multifarious increase in the publication of legal literature, in most of which the question of Stridhana has been seriously dealt with. Among such publications, mention should be made of Priyanath Sen's General Principles of Hindu Jurisprudence, 1918, K.P. Jaisawal's Manu and Yagnavalkya, A Comparison and a Contrast, 1930, Radha Binod Pal's History of Hindu Law, 1938, P.V. Kane's History of Dharmashastra, Volume 2, 1941, and Volume 3, 1946, N.C. Sengupta's Evolution of Ancient Indian Law, 1953, L. Sternbach's Sternbach Judicial Studies in Ancient Indian Law, 1965-7, J.D.M. Derrett's Derrett Religion, Law and State in India, 1968, etc. This abundance of modern studies on the ancient legal tradition of India amply testifies that Stridhana, or women's property, was never a neglected subject. It should also be remembered in this connection that a considerable bulk of the civil suits has always been concerned with women's property, and as such the concept of Stridhana has been the subject of wide discussion and controversy. So goes a proverb in India that the lawyers fill their coffers with women's money, and this is not without any significance. In fact, all the studies on Stridhana have been from a legalistic and professional point of view. The only exception is the work of P.V. Kane, in which there has been an attempt to view the whole thing in an historical perspective. Without much exaggeration, it may be said that most of the well-known modern treatises, page 115, on Hindu law purport in a subtle way to devise endless ways and means to deprive the women, especially the widows, of their property right, and these cunning devices have been given the status of law in the name of the interpretation of the ancient texts rather than what the texts suggest by themselves. As Kane has rightly said, quote, it is also to be regarded that owing to the ignorance of Sanskrit on the part of the most judges that had to decide cases of Hindu law, the opinion of individual learned authors, were followed without personal examination by judges on the authorities on which the opinions of authors were based. Stop, unquote, bracket, Kane, Roman 3, 757n, bracket closes, para. The best way to deprive a woman of a property right is to make the scope of Stridhana as narrow as possible so that it might comprise no more than a few clothes and ornaments. Thus, while according to the Mitakshara, Mitakshara, the property inherited by a woman or obtained at a partition should fall definitely within the category of Stridhana and pass automatically to her own relations after her death, the modern jurists have taken just a different stand, saying that the property inherited by a woman from her parents or parents-in-law or husband or anyone should not fall within the category of Stridhana, and that it should pass after her death not to her own relations or natural heirs, but to the next heir of the person from whom she inherited it. Para. While dealing with the property rights of ancient India, one should not forget that it took a long time for the primitive customs and conventions by which the ancient societies were governed to get streamlined into a widely acceptable legal system, that quite for a long time The whole matter of inheritance was not regulated by any general state power, and that different regions of the country had and still have different legal traditions. Even in a single region, laws and customs vary from caste to caste, community to community. Everywhere in India, there is a wide gulf of difference between the codified and customary laws. The former consists of the laws and customs as codified in the Dharmashastras or Smritis and is followed mostly by the dominant section comprising about 20% of the total population of India. Others follow various customary laws and tradition for the study of which we are to depend on the vast mass of anthropological literature, including correspondences, notes and queries, gazetteers, memoirs, journals, census reports, surveys and individual monographs on tribes and castes. Page 116. Para. Matrilineal inheritance, which is prevalent among various tribes and castes of India, is a typical example of customary laws. Capital P, capital R, capital T, P.R.T, Gudon, Gurdon, and A. Playfair, Playfair, have given details of this form of inheritance in their works entitled The Khasis and the Garos of Meghalaya, which were published respectively in 1907 and 1909. Among these tribes, the entire property belongs to the mothers and it is transmitted in the female line from mother to daughters, the youngest one having the largest share. Such form of inheritance has been noticed among various tribes and castes of Madhya Pradesh, Karnataka and Kerala, details of which are found in such works as the Tribes and Castes of the Central Provinces of India, 1916 by R. V. Russell, Russell, and Rai Bahadur Hira Lal, the Mysore Tribes and Castes, 1928 to 35 by H. V. Nanjundaya, Nanjundayya, and L. K. Ananthakrishna Iyer, The Tribes and Castes of Southern India, 1909 by E. Thurston, Thurston, and K. Rangachari, and The Cochin Tribes and Castes, 1909 by L. K. Ananthakrishna Iyer. In Kerala, the Nair joint family or Tarwad, Tarwad, consists of a woman, her daughters and grandchildren in the female line, and when it grows unusually big, it often splits into smaller family units called Tavazis, Tavazis. A thorough study of the rules of matrilineal inheritance was made by Baron Omer Rolf, ROLF, Ehrenfels, Ehrenfels, Ehrenfels in his Mother Right in India, which was published in 1941. The custom of matrilineal inheritance has also been extensively dealt with in Devi Prasad Chattopadhyay's Lokayata, 1959, K. M. Kapadia's Marriage and Family in India, 1966, and the present writer's Indian Mother Goddess, 1970, 1977. In certain cases, again, we come across a transitory phase between matrilineal and patrilineal forms of inheritance in which the sister's son gets the property of his mother's brother. Reference to such a typical system is found in the Mahabharata, section 8.45.13, in which it is stated that this form of inheritance was in vogue among the Arattas, Arattas, and Bahikas, Bahikas. In southern India, this system was known as Alia Santana, Alia-Santana, which was followed even by the kings of Travancore. What we want to suggest is that, so far as the question of inheritance and ownership of property was concerned, the doctrine of patria, Patria, potestas, Potestas, so intensely crystallized in the Smritis, was never a universal phenomenon in India. Para. From the internal evidence of the Rig Veda, it appears that the concept of individual ownership was not prevalent in the early Vedic age. References to, quote, common wealth, unquote, or, quote, collective ownership, unquote, are found abundantly in the Rig Veda. Cf. Roman 1.141.1 semicolon. Roman 3.2.12 semicolon. Roman 6.26.1 semicolon. Roman 7.76.5 semicolon. Roman 8.99.8, comma, etc. Stop. Tribal bond of kinship was an essential feature of the early Vedic society, and as such, tribal wealth was divided among the constituent clans and subclans. Page 117. This is attested by the passages referring to Varya and Bhaga, which were the Rigvedic terms of division. Land was not any form of property in the early Vedic age because agriculture was then hardly known. Even when agriculture was introduced in the later Vedic age, land was subject to joint or corporate holding, so the question of individual ownership and inheritance of land could not arise at all. The Vedic tribes were mostly pastoral warriors, and they counted wealth in terms of cattle. The pastoral societies have, however, greater scope to develop the sense of property and individual ownership, since cattle could be preserved and multiplied, used as the best medium of exchange, increased by wars and raids, and divided among clans, families, even individuals. Evidence of some kind of individual possession is found in the later books of the Rig Veda. That in the later period of the Rig Veda, even women were entitled to have some share of cattle wealth as marriage gift is suggested in the, quote, wedding hymn, unquote, Roman 10.85.13-38. The term mentioned there is Vahatu, Vahtu, which has been explained by Sayana as, quote, cow and other gifts given for pleasing the girl, unquote, stop, para. Needless to say that the Vedic society, owing to its pastoral background, was essentially patriarchal, which is attested by the abundance of misogynistic passages in the Vedic texts. For example, in the Satapatha Brahmana, Roman 4.4.2.3, it is stated that, quote, women own neither themselves nor an inheritancer, unquote, stop. Yaska, in his Nirukta, Roman 3.4, says that women are not entitled to partition and inheritance. But whatever was the attitude towards women, it was not possible in practice to suppress all their property rights especially owing to the fact that there were parallel traditions everywhere in which women were treated differently and the influence of which could not be ignored by the Vedic lawgivers. The term parinaya, Parinahya, parinaya has been used in the Taittiriya Samhita, Romans 6.2.1.1, indicating the authority of the wife on family resources. This recurs in the Purva Mimamsa Sutra, Romans 6.10.10 of Jaimini, which has been explained by Shabara in terms of possessing certain forms of property by the wife, and almost in the same sense the term has been used by Manu, Roman 9.11. It should, however, be stressed that although the concepts of property and division are found in the Vedic texts, especially the later ones, in that formative period of economic life, there was a natural contradiction between the social and individual ownership. The Dharma Sutras are openly in favor of an extremely patrilineal form of inheritance, in which, in the absence of sons, the property will rather go to the near and remote agnates, Agnates, bracket, Shopindo and Sakulya relations, bracket closes, of the property holder, than to the daughters of his own seed. The Dharma Sutras, Apastambho, Roman 2.6.14.19, Baudhayana, Roman 2.2.49, and Vashishtha, Roman 17.48 to 9, however, say that the ornaments and such wealth as bestowed upon her by her relations, both agnate and cognate, should be absolutely owned by her. Text continued in next file. Page 118, para. It is in the Dharma Shastras or Smritis that we come across a distinct codification of the rules relating to ownership, inheritance, and partition. The codes of Manu are the first systematic expositions of all these, and his basic approaches to these questions were followed in principle, with certain conservative or liberal reservations by the later lawgivers. The Manusmriti must have been composed before the beginning of the Christian era, while the Smritis of Yagna, Valkya, Narada and Brahaspati were composed within the limit of the Gupta age, and those of Katyayana, Vyasa and Parashara in the post-Gupta period. Manu made the Dharma Sutra traditions up to date, but while dealing with the Dharma Sutra injunctions regarding the property rights of women, he faced two apparently contradictory principles. The first is that Dharma Sutras allow women to become exclusive owners of such wealth as is obtained by them as gifts from their relations. This formed the basis of his famous formulation of the six-fold concept of Stridhana, bracket opens, Roman 9, 194, bracket closes, stop. The second principle of the Dharma Sutras was rather difficult for him to accept. The Dharma Sutras categorically say that property should be transmitted only through the male line, and that women have no right to inherit their paternal property by themselves. Manu was no less patriarchal than the authors of the Dharma Sutras, but as the first universal lawgiver, he had to take into consideration the existing laws belonging to other popular traditions, apart from the Vedic sources which speak of women's right to inherit their ancestral property. So he had to make a compromise. Thus, on the one hand, nowhere in his codes he says that sisters are equally entitled to the patrimony as their brothers, but on the other he says that for the purpose of the marriage of their sisters, the brothers should forego 1/4 of their own shares in favor of the sisters. Bracket Roman 9, 118, bracket closes, stop. Obviously, this does not mean that the daughters are the natural heirs of their father. The father is, however, at liberty to give any amount of wealth as gift to his daughter, and such gifts are regarded as belonging to the Pitridotto and Annadeya, Anvadheya, categories of Sridhana. Apart from this, if a man is sonless, he can regard his daughter as putrika, or, quote, daughter functioning as son, unquote, who will be his legitimate heir, bracket Roman 9, 127, bracket closes, stop. Page 119. The wealth owned by the mother will pass to the daughter, bracket opens Roman 9.131, bracket closes, stop. It is surprising to note that Manu is completely silent about the rights of the widow. Para. The codes of Manu had a tremendous impact not only on the subsequent lawgivers but also on others belonging to different disciplines. Even a philosopher like Shankara unconditionally says that in regard to social matters, Manu is final. Of course, among the subsequent lawgivers, some differences from Manu in approach are found. For example, Yajnavalkya supports Manu's insistence on the doctrine of primogeniture, but he holds that the father and sons have equal ownership of ancestral property, which subsequently led to the emergence of Janma Swakta Vada, JANMA-SVATTVA-VADA, peculiar to the Mitakshara school. He says, in conformity with Manu's view, that after the father's death the sons shall divide property among themselves, the mother taking an equal share and the sisters a 4th part of the son's share. Like Manu, Yajnavalkya does not make any clear statement whether this 1/4 share enjoyed by the sisters is owing to a natural succession or to a moral obligation for which the brothers should forego their own 1/4. So far as Sridhana is concerned, Yajnavalkya clarifies the stand of Manu and insists categorically on the exclusive right of women on their Sridhana. The husband can make use of it only in case of a famine or for the performance of some specifically efficacious religious rite, or during illness or under such severe conditions when he has no other way to save himself without the help of his wife's money. Para. Later lawgivers like Narada, Brihaspati and Katyayana and their successors follow either Manu or Yajnavalkya with diminishing importance on the doctrine of primogeniture upheld by the earlier authorities. In regard to inheritance and partition, so far as the shares of women are concerned, they also speak of the 1/4 share conventionally without any further clarification. However, in regard to Sridhana, some of them are more particular. Among them, Katyayana, bracket opens 594 FF dot comma 895 to 920, bracket closes, makes the most elaborate treatment of Stridhana, making improvement of what was suggested by Manu and Yagnavalkya, and his version has been accepted by all digests, including the Daya Bhaga. He defines Stridhana under the following categories: Adhyagni, Adhyagni, or what is given to a woman at the time of marriage before the nuptial fire; Adhyavahanika, or what she obtains when she is being taken from her father's house to the bridegroom's; Pitridotto, or what is given to her through affection, bracket opens. To this category, Manu includes gifts, page 120, from the husband during love-making, bracket closes, semicolon. Shulka, or what is given to her as the bridal price, which includes household articles as well. Annadheya, Anvadeva, or what is given to her after marriage from the family of her husband or of her own parents, bracket opens. To a certain extent it corresponds to Manu's Pitridotto, Matridotto and Bhratridotto categories, though he refers to a seventh category under the title Anvadeya, meaning gift subsequent, bracket closes, semicolon, and Saudaika, or what is obtained by a married woman in her husband's house or by a maiden in the house of her father. In other words, colon, quote opens, all property, bracket, whether movable or immovable, bracket closes, obtained by a woman, either as a maiden, or at marriage, or after marriage, from her parents or from husband and his family, bracket opens, except immovable property given by husband, bracket closes, is included within the scope of Stridhana, bracket opens, Priyonath Shen, 335-6, bracket closes, unquote. Para. From the 10th century onwards, there was a qualitative change in the approach towards property and property relations. It was possible after the advent of Jimuta Vahana, circa AD 1100 to 50, and Vigyaneshwara, circa AD 1080 to 1100, the Dayabhaga of Jimuta Vahana and the Mitakshara of Vigyaneshwara became so important that throughout the successive ages, these two works and their legal interpretations came to be regarded as almost the sole source of the Hindu laws relating to ownership, partition, and inheritance. According to the Dayabhaga of Jimuta Vahana, ownership implies absolute competence of the owner to dispose of his property at his will. The owner is the sole lord of his property, having the right of its alienation without the consent of his sons or relations. Jimuta Vahana has also brought a significant change in the concept of Shopindo relation. He says that there is no reason to hold that this relation should evolve only among the strictly patrilineal agnates. Rather, those who are more intimately associated with the family, notwithstanding cognates of different male descent, like the daughter's son, father's daughter's son, maternal uncle, etc., should be regarded as belonging to the Shopindo relation. This is a revolutionary departure from the approach of the previous lawgivers. Jimuta Vahana accepts Katyayana's definition of Stridhana, allowing every right to the woman to give, sell, or enjoy it independently of her husband. Jimuta Vahana also categorically says that if the owner of the Stridhana does not bestow her property at her own will to her chosen person or persons, the property will devolve equally upon the sons and unmarried daughters. Para. The Mitakshara Vigyaneshwara, which is actually a commentary on the Yagnavalkya Smriti, page 121, is of more complex character than the Dayobhaga of Jimutavahana. Vigyaneshwara, unlike Jimutavahana, does not admit absolute ownership of an individual over the property and holds that certain relations acquire ownership at the moment of their birth. As soon as a son is born, he becomes co-owner of the property enjoyed by the father. In the field of succession, agnates are preferred to the cognates. Vigyaneshwara has given the sonless widow the right to succeed to the whole property of her husband. As between the claims of the daughters, he prefers unmarried to the married and unprovided to the endowed daughter. His rule of succession is mainly based upon the principle of propinquity or proximity of relationship, and as such he allows the daughter's son to succeed immediately after the daughter and before the mother and the father, and the mother to succeed before the father. According to Vigyaneshwara's concept, the Stridhana is that form of property which is acquired by a woman, quote, by inheritance, purchase, partition, seizure and finding, unquote, stop. Among the 6 categories of Stridhana, in the case of those belonging to Anvadheya and Pitridatta categories, daughters are allowed to succeed equally, and in their absence, the sons. Stridhana belonging to 4 other categories will be succeeded in the following order: unmarried daughter, unendowed married and endowed married daughter. The Stridhana of a childless woman goes to the husband. Para. Although there was not so much anomaly in the case of Stridhana which could be accrued in the hand of a woman through a variety of sources, and after her lifetime, possession and enjoyment of it, it could be succeeded by her heirs in the female line on the basis of the principle of propinquity. The question of a woman's natural right to succeed her father's property directly, as that happened in the case of her brothers, has not been clearly answered in the Smritis and their commentaries. From the bewildering variety of statements found in these texts, what actually emerges as has rightly or wrongly been understood by the present writer may be reproduced as follows. Regarding direct inheritance of the father's property, the Dharma Shastras or the Smritis and their commentaries follow the Dharma Sutra tradition, according to which property will devolve only among the sons and in their absence among the agnates in the male line. That the sisters were entitled to get 1/4 of their brother's share on account of their marriage was more an expression of moral obligation than of a legal compulsion. When all the Smritis and their commentaries unanimously say that what a woman obtains, page 122, through inheritance becomes a category of her Stridhana, it does not mean direct inheritance of her father's property. Rather, it means the direct inheritance of her mother's Stridhana. What she obtained from her father, brothers, and paternal relations was gift rather than inheritance, and the wealth thus accrued in the Stridhana might be turned into a property to be inherited by her daughters. The question of a daughter's direct inheritance could arise only when the father was sonless. But the Smritis and their commentaries are not at all unanimous on the question whether, in the case of a sonless person, his daughter can be natural heir of her father's property, or it will go to the agnates of the paternal line according to the principle of propinquity. Even Manu's concept of putrika, that is, sonhood ascribed to the daughter by the sonless father, has been subject to keen controversy among the commentators. This remained a floating question, causing innumerable lawsuits till the enactment of the Hindu code. Again, when all the Smriti writers agree that what is obtained by a woman owing to the partition of her property will form a category of a stridhana, this undoubtedly implies an inheritance, but it pertains to the wife, widow, mother, and even grandmother, and not to the daughter. The wife, the widow, the mother, or the grandmother could not demand a partition by themselves, but were entitled to a share when the partition took place. The wife's share in most cases was equal to that of a son. The widow of a deceased co-parsener, C-O-P-A-R-C-E-N-E-R, co-parsener, was a member of the co-parsenary. Katyayana 926 allows a sonless widow to become the sole owner of her husband's property, though this stand is not maintained in all the Smritis. The Dayabhaga holds that the widow of a sonless member of a joint family is entitled to have a share of the property, while the Mitakshara allows absolute ownership of the widow over the movable property of her deceased husband. Page 123. Turmeric land, women's property rights in Tamil society since early medieval times. Kanakalatha Mukund. As with many questions relating to the status of women in Indian and specifically Hindu society, the simple question, quote, what rights did women have? No property, unquote, becomes an extremely complex one with no uniform answers which are valid for all regions, castes or classes. To begin with, there is no unanimity on this question, even among the various smritis and texts of jurisprudence. That there should be a considerable variance between theory and customary practice is understandable. What is difficult to reconcile is the general perception that women have no property rights in Hindu society, even though there have been several legal cases about women's property rights and the Stridhana, which even went up to the Privy Council. Footnote 1. This paper is an attempt to examine the issue of women's property rights in the specific regional culture of Tamil society. Inscriptional evidence and other sources allow us to trace some aspects of how women have controlled and used property since early medieval times. In spite of large gaps in data, this evidence can be related to usage in recent times. Accordingly, we can try to capture, even though imperfectly, the arrangements which were in vogue prior to the Hindu Act of Succession, 1956. To understand the nature of rights in land or other property, we need to examine both customary and legal rights, the extent of direct control, and the power of alienation. Not surprisingly, what comes across is that, in spite of some general common features, there is endless variation in customs and practices. Para. Thus, what this preliminary investigation reveals is that the diversity of women's property rights across regions slash subregions slash castes slash classes slash families can be dealt with only through a series of micro studies. What I have tried to do is to point to the diversities, page 124, and hazard some tentative hypothesis which may instigate other scholars to explore these challenging untrodden paths. What is women's property? Question mark. In the ancient Smritis and Dharmashastras, bracket opens, for the most part dating back to 200 BC to AD 400, bracket closes, which were the first systematic treatment of Hindu law, the question of property rights and inheritance formed one of the important aspects of civil law, with the more controversial question of women's rights also being discussed. Footnote 2. Even the Manusmriti recognized women's property, or Stridhana, and the right of unmarried daughters to a share of the father's property. Yagnavalkya, Katyayana, and Narada were the important jurists who, though by no means unanimous in their views, further developed and defined women's property rights. To condense their views in the simplest form, women could acquire property in four principal ways. 1i, what was given to them at the time of marriage, bracket adhyagni, bracket closes. 2i, gifts given after marriage, either by the parents, husband or husband's family, comma, quote, through affection, unquote, dash, often referred to as Saudaika, Saudayika, comma, Priti Dana or Priti Datta. 3i, through inheritance, comma, and 4 by working. Para. The earliest recognized form of women's property was Stridhana, or what was given to the bride at the time of marriage. There seems to be a sound basis to believe that this Stridhana was originally part of the bride price, or Kanya Sulka, Kanyasulka, paid by the bridegroom, a part of which was passed on to the bride by her parents. The ready acceptance of this without reservation as the property of the woman also derived from the general disfavor in which the practice of Kanyasulka came to be held, bracket open, so that, comma, by excluding the husband from the right to this property, the habit could be discouraged, bracket closes, stop. Other gifts which were given on the occasion of a wedding were also denoted as Stridhana, mainly because they tended to be small in value. Para. Saudaika was also included in Stridhana. This specific allusion to a gift is in itself an indication that a woman had no automatic right to this wealth as an inheritance right. There was also a further rider that if any immovable property had been gifted by the husband, the wife had only limited ad-based usufruct, USUFRUCT, rights in that property. Stridhana, on the other hand, was the absolute property of the woman, and it is a matter of interest that husbands were forbidden to use or sell the Stridhana except in times of dire need. Para. The earnings of a woman were universally stated to belong to the family and could not be considered Stridhana. Page 125. In this context, it is interesting to note that in present-day Tamil Nadu, In common perception, the only class of women who were thought to have property rights were the Devadasis. Footnote 3. These women and their immediate kin usually constituted self-supporting, female-headed households whose property in legal language was acquired by, quote, self-exertion and mechanical arts, unquote, stop. Courtesans, bracket, gonikas, bracket closes, of course were certainly prominent on the social scene even in ancient times, but the debates on women's property rights seem to have been located only within the patriarchal system. Para. The really thorny issue in women's property rights was the question of inheritance rights to family property, of daughters to the father's property, and of married women/widows to the husband's property. Again, there was no consensus on these rights, but slowly the view gained ground that while daughters were normally entitled only to their marriage portions, they could inherit property when there were no sons in the family or if they were unmarried at the time of the death of the father. Somewhat reluctantly, widows were also accepted as having the right to a share of the husband's property, but on the death of a widow, her share reverted to the heirs of her late husband. Para. Two major schools of thought on property rights emerged in the early 12th century, the Dayabhaga school of Jimuta Vahana and the Mitakshara school of Vigyaneshwara. The Dayabhaga school gave more comprehensive inheritance rights to widows, while the Mitakshara school specified that Stridhana went by succession from mother to daughter. Bracket opens, the preferred line of succession was unmarried daughters first, comma, married, comma, but not well-off daughters next, comma, married daughters, comma, sons and other heirs, bracket closes, stop. The main significance of these works was that they became the basis of Hindu law on these issues under the British courts, which referred to these authorities for establishing what constituted women's property. They ultimately developed the idea of two kinds of women's property. The first was that of Stridhana, as defined in the older texts, which on the death of the woman would pass on to her children/heirs, that is, she constituted an independent stock of descent. Most often the recognized succession was down the female line, but according to some schools, all children shared equally in the property. The other form of property, termed, quote, woman's estate, unquote, referred to the share of the widow, over which she had no power of alienation, bracket, except under extenuating circumstances, bracket closes, footnote 4. Page 126. These rights also varied from region to region depending on whether local usage subscribed to Mitakshara or Dayabhaga. Para. Thus, traditionally, there was no definitive or uniform code relating to women's property rights. Even among the Smriti writers, there was an ongoing debate as to whether customary practice or shastras should take precedence. We gathered that what was being laid down as law tended to be prescriptive and not always a record of what existed in practice. Equally, that the modifications which were made in Stridhana and widows' rights derived, at least in part, from de facto recognition of customary rights. That the usage varied from region to region was also acknowledged, And even from very early times, commentators pointed out that in the Dakshina, southern region, women's rights were more broad-based. Footnote 5. By the 12th century, when the Dayabhaga and Mitakshara texts were being authoritatively codified, there also existed a large corpus of inscriptions in South India. This coincidence in time makes it possible for us to juxtapose the actual with the prescriptive and to understand the historical experience relating to women's property rights in South India. Next file, Inscriptional Evidence. Page 126. Inscriptional Evidence. There are many references to women and their use of property in inscriptions in Tamil Nadu. Footnote 6. Their range and sheer volume indicate that inscriptions can indeed be used as a sound basis for reconstructing social history. The 348 inscriptions used here are very suggestive of local customs in this context. In order to understand the social background of the women, a combined caste/class ordering has been drawn up. Footnote 7. By and large, class rather than caste is used as the reference point so that even though most local chiefs and local elite families were Velalas, Velallas, and occasionally Brahmanas, they are designated by the class and not by caste. Tables 1 and 2. In 21 cases, it has not been possible to identify either caste or class background. Quote, major royalty, unquote, refers to dowager queens or queens and princesses of the imperial dynasties, bracket, predominantly Cholas, Pandyas, and Pallavas, bracket closes, stop. The temple dancers are referred to by their old Tamil name, Tevaratiyal, rather than the more familiar Devadasi. This has been done intentionally because the word Tevaratiyal specifically means a servant of God, and clearly the dancer was only one of the many kinds of Tevaratiyar, bracket opens, the masculine and plural form, bracket closes, who served in the temple in various capacities, in the kitchen, arranging the flowers, keeping the temple clean, etc. Page 127. The local chief and local elite were the dominant land-owning classes. In modern terminology, they might be termed dominant peasant classes. Their power base derived from their land ownership and their relationship with the royal families, since most of the queens came from these families. Para. The inscriptions refer to several kinds of property transactions, gifts to the temple, sales and assignment of property, and or land revenues to the Tevaratiyal for their services. These transactions also indicate that the ownership rights of women with regard to their property extended to the power of alienation through gifts and sales. Women also bought property in addition to acquiring property through inheritance or being employed, so that virtually all the forms of women's property rights were found to operate among the Tamil people, though the Smritis did not acknowledge some of these rights. Para. The temple was the focus of social and economic life of the locality and was the beneficiary of major patronage and endowments from the royal houses and the state, as well as a variety of more modest offerings, usually for the quote, merit, unquote, of the donor or a specified beneficiary, bracket, such as husband, son, brother, king, etc., bracket closes. The latter were necessary to finance a variety of routine temple services, lamps which burn day and night, bracket, nanta vilakku, bracket closes, or at dawn/dusk, sandhya deepam, food offering to the various murtis in the temple, or flowers, etc. To the devotees and brahmanas, stop. Footnote 8. Gifts were sometimes made directly in kind, gold and silver jewelry or vessels, lamps, etc., but were more often given indirectly in a two-stage process in which the service was maintained through the income earned or interest on an asset which was assigned to the temple or farmed out to specific individuals/groups or local assemblies. For instance, the normal assignment for a specified measure of oil or ghee to be given per day to the temple for burning an eternal lamp was 90 sheep or 32 cattle. The recipient of the livestock would have to ensure that the oil or ghee as specified was regularly given to the temple. Similarly, money, gold coins or gold, would be donated, which would be given out to individuals or groups or even the local assemblies who would undertake to pay 15% interest or an equivalent value in ghee or oil to the temple. Strict fines up to 25% of the value of the endowment were specified for even one day's failure to keep up the payment, and groups which had received the money but had been unable or unwilling to fulfill these terms and conditions would have to sell some land of equivalent value to the temple. Page 128. Since the scope for malfeasance, MALFEASANCE, malfeasance was very large, under these arrangements, audit committees were often appointed to check the temple accounts. Para. Against the general background, we can also get a more detailed picture by referring to some specific information in the inscriptions. Coming to the class background of the donors, two groups, table 2, are predominant. The ruling classes, royalty, local chiefs, local elite, and military, account for 63.5%, 221 of the donors. Women of the royal families were involved actively in the construction and maintenance of temples. The extent of their endowments precludes the facile assumption that they were only utilizing some kind of a personal, quote, allowance, unquote, made to them. The earliest reference to a queen who constructed a temple was to the Pallava queen Rangapataka in the 8th century. Footnote 9. The local feudal chiefs whose daughters married into the royal families maintained a steady and continuous tradition of patronage to temples, but the most vigorous and emphatic patronage came from the Chola queens and princesses. A look at Table 1, for instance, shows that in Thanjavur district alone there are 73 inscriptions in the 10th and 11th centuries and 13 in Tiruchi district, 10th century, which record their gifts to temples. Since dowager queens and princesses were also actively promoting these activities, it seems reasonable to argue that they must have been making these endowments out of their personal property, most likely inherited on the maternal side from the local land-owning elite families. Para. Three significant personalities in this respect were Chempiyanma Devi, Cempiyamadevi, mother of King Uttama Chola, Loka Mahadevi or Oloka Mahadevi, Danti Shakti, Queen of Rajaraja Chola, and Kunta V, his sister. The Dowager Queen, Chempiyananda Devi, in addition to her numerous gifts and endowments, exercised such authority even in the reign of her grandnephew Rajaraja that she could command one of the temple managers to donate money to meet the expenditures incurred in the daily rituals of the temple, besides fixing the emoluments of the temple servants and arranging for various items of temple expenditures to be made from land assignments. Footnote 10. Queen Loka Mahadevi not only built a temple in her own name, Loka Mahadevishwaram, but she also took a keen interest in the day-to-day management of the temple. Even as a dowager queen, she ordered the reclamation and cultivation of waste lands in a village, the income to be used for special festivals in the temple. Footnote 11, page 129, para. The other important class of women referred to in the inscriptions were the employed women, 19.8%, while the most numerous group was the Tevaratiyal. It is clear that women were employed in various capacities in the palaces, households of the elite, in the temples, and in their capacity as wives of temple servants. In all cases, they obviously could exercise ownership rights over their income/property, although this was not accepted by the Smritis, once again highlighting the dichotomy between the law in theory and the practice. Para. The Tevaratiyal, of course, represents a case worth studying in itself. In the early period, the temple dancer had both a secular and religious significance in the social milieu which revolved around the temple. She was clearly regarded as an employee of the state who served in the temple at par with other temple servants. The dancers could be transferred from one temple to another and were paid either by being assigned shares in land, the revenue from specified taxes, or, quote, Kani, K-A-N-I, unquote, bracket landholding, bracket closes, rights in temple lands. Footnote 12. Paying for a Tevaratiyal to dance in the temple was considered to be an act of religious merit, even in normal times, and especially when temples had suffered after the Muslim invasions in the 14th century and the consequent disruptions in social and political life. Footnote 13. There are several references to the property owned, sold, and bought by the Tevaratiyal, which indicate that they had property independent of the temple. Footnote 14, para. Contemporary consciousness tends to locate the temple dancer within the social structure, primarily with reference to her sex life. The earlier evidence indicates a far more complex reality. There is even a reference to a married Tevaratiyal, while the sister of another was evidently a favorite wife/concubine of a local chief. Footnote 15. The most common arrangement, as in later times, may well have been that they became the mistresses of the local landed elite. But this seems to have been not only an accepted but even a respectable social practice, and there are several references to the concubines bracket pakiar bracket closes of local chiefs who made gifts to temples in their own rights. At least one reference shows that property was transferred to the quote unofficial unquote given out of affection or priti dana, Pritidana, priti dana. Footnote 16. Para. Though we thus have convincing evidence of women's property rights, it is also equally clear that such rights were not universal or uniform for all women. The extent to which women could control their property depended on the usage current in their immediate social circle. Page 133. Among the well-to-do, land was given as Sri Dhanam to the daughter on her marriage. There is even a reference to land gifted as Sri Dhanam to the goddess in the temple. But as this gave the husband the status and the right of doing service in the temple and the privileges due to that in local affairs, footnote 17, it was clearly he who was regarded as the landholder. Para. Two contemporary inscriptions of circa 1270 capture the anomalies in women's status very well. One refers to a woman who was a member of the local committee of justice, Niyayattar, Niyayattar. The other two Brahmana widows without sons who were forced to sell their land. Footnote 18. The latter gives the bare outlines of what was perhaps a fruitless struggle on the part of the widows to retain their land. They were, however, not given any help by their relatives, Gyantis, and finally had to sell the land. The fact that they were represented by close male relatives, one by her father, the other by her son-in-law, who was also her brother, in the sale negotiations indicates that there was strong social and intra-family opposition to their owning land when they had no sons. While the rights of the women of the royal families at one end of the social spectrum or of the Tevaratial, a special group, were not questioned in the middle classes, these rights were not equally well protected or accepted. Para. The inscriptions, table 1, also throw up some tentative inferences. One noteworthy fact is that with the beginning of Hoysala/Vijayanagar rule, there is a sharp decline in the number of references to women after the 14th century. The inescapable reference seems to be that Vijayanagar society was far more restrictive when it came to women's property rights. Even though women probably continued to enjoy the more open traditional arrangements in Tamil Nadu, the culture of the rulers discouraged the public display of these rights through recorded endowments, sales, etc. Another point to note is that the inscriptions are most numerous in the heartland of imperial power, Tanjavur, Tiruchi, South, and North Arcot and Chingalpet districts. It would be interesting to investigate whether significant sub-regional variations existed within Tamil country. Tables on pages 130 to 133 and 134 have been read in the next file. page 130. Table 1. Distribution of women, property owners. Table. Columns. District, century, status, number. Chingalpet, 0. Brahmana, 2. Chingalpet, 8. Major royalty, 2. Chingalpet, 9. Blank, 1. Chingalpet, 9. Brahmana, 1. Chingalpet, 9. Local chief, 5. Chingalpet, 9. Major royalty, 1. Chingalpet, 10. Tevaratial, 2. Chingalpet, 10. Local chief, 1. Chingalpet, 10. Major royalty, 6. Chingalpet, 11. Brahmana, 9. Chingalpet, 11. Brahmana, 9. Chingalpet, 11. Tevaratial, 3. Chingalpet, 11. Local chief, 2. Chingalpet, 11. Local elite, 1. Chingalpet, 11. Maidservant, 1. Chingalpet, 11. Major royalty, 2. Chingalpet, 11. Palace maidservant, 1. Chingalpet, 12. Blank, 3. Chingalpet, 12. Brahmana, 2. Chingalpet, 12. Tevaratial, 4. Chingalpet, 12. Local chief, 1. Chingalpet, 12. Major royalty, 1. Chingalpet, 12. Temple servant, 1. Chingalpet, 13. Blank, 1. Chingalpet, 13. Tevaratial, 6. Chingalpet, 13. Local chief, 1. Chingalpet, 13. Local elite, 1. Chingalpet, 13. Religious/Hindu, 1. Chingalpet, 14. Tevaratial, 2. Chingalpet, 14. Local chief, 2. Chittoor, 9. Major royalty, 1. Chittoor, 12. Local chief, 2. Chittoor, 13. Local chief, 4. Chittoor, 15. Blank, 1. Chittoor, 18. Local chief, 1. Chittoor, 19. Local chief, 1. Coimbatore, 11. Blank, 2. Coimbatore, 12. Major royalty, 1. Coimbatore, 12. Vechala, 2. Coimbatore, 13. Tevaratial, 1. Coimbatore, 13. Local elite, 1. Coimbatore, 13. Palace maidservant, 1. Kuddappa, Cuddapah, 12. Local chief, 1. Kuddappa, 12. Military leader, 1. Page 131, table continued. Madurai, 8. Local chief, 1. Madurai, 8. Shepherd 1. Madurai 11, Major Royalty 2. Madurai 13, Local Chief 2. Madurai 18, Local Chief 2. Madurai 18, Major Royalty 2. Madurai 19, Tevaratial 1. Nellore, Nallore 17, Local Chief 1. North Arcot 9, Local Chief 1. North Arcot 9, Major Royalty 4. North Arcot 10, Major Royalty 4. North Arcot 10, Religious / Jain 1. North Arcot 11, Tevaratial 1. North Arcot 11, Local Chief 1. North Arcot 11, Major Royalty 1. North Arcot 11, Merchant 1. North Arcot 13, blank 1. North Arcot 13, Local Chief 6. North Arcot 13, Local Elite 1. North Arcot 14, Tevaratial 1. North Arcot 14, Local Chief 1. North Arcot 16, blank 1. North Arcot 16, Local Chief 1. North Arcot 16, Local Chief 1. Pudukottai, Pudukottai 10, Local Chief 2. Pudukottai 11, Local Chief 1. Pudukottai 12, Tevaratial 2. Pudukottai 13, Tevaratial 1. Pudukottai 13, Local Chief 1. Pudukottai 14, Tevaratial 1. Pudukottai 15, Temple Servant 2. Ramnad 8, Brahmana 1. Ramnad 11, Brahmana 2. Ramnad 11, Tevaratial 1. Ramnad 11, Local Chief 1. Ramnad 12, Major Royalty 1. Ramnad 14, Local Chief 1. Salem, Salem 12, Local Chief 1. South Arcot 9, Local Chief 2. South Arcot 10, blank 2. South Arcot 10, Brahmana 1. South Arcot 10, Tevaratial 1. South Arcot 10, Local Chief 9. South Arcot 10, Local Elite 1. South Arcot 10, Major Royalty 2. South Arcot 10, Palace Maidservant 1. Page 132. South Arcot 11, blank 1. South Arcot 11, Tevaratial 3. South Arcot 11, Local Chief 4. South Arcot 11, Major Royalty 4. South Arcot 11, Palace Maidservant 1. South Arcot 11, Temple Servant 1. South Arcot 12, Tevaratial 2. South Arcot 12, Local Chief 3. South Arcot 12, Merchant 1. South Arcot 13, Tevaratial 4. South Arcot 13, Major Royalty 1. South Arcot 18, Merchant 1. Tanjavur, Tanjavur 9, Local Chief 2. Tanjavur 9, Major Royalty 2. Tanjavur 10, Brahmana 1. Tanjavur 10, Local Chief 2. Tanjavur 10, Local Elite 1. Tanjavur 10, Major Royalty 36, Tanjavur 10, Military Leader 1, Tanjavur 10, Palace Metsavant 4, Tanjavur 11, Tevratial 5, Tanjavur 11, Local Chief 2, Tanjavur 11, Major Royalty 37, Tanjavur 11, Palace Metsavant 3, Tanjavur 12, blank 4, Tanjavur 12, Tevratial 2, Tanjavur 12, Major Royalty 1, Tanjavur 12, Palace Metsavant 1, Tanjavur 13, blank 2, Tanjavur 13, Brahmana 2, Tanjavur 13, Tevratial 2, Tanjavur 13, Local Chief 1, Tanjavur 13, Religious/Hindu 1, Tanjavur 17, Tevratial 1, Tanjore 11, Brahmana 1, Tanjore 12, Local Chief 1, Tiruchi 0, blank 1, Tiruchi 10, Brahmana 1, Tiruchi 10, Local Chief 2, Tiruchi 10, Major Royalty 13, Tiruchi 11, Brahmana 2, Tiruchi 11, Local Chief 1, Tiruchi 11, Local Elite 1, Tiruchi 11, Metsavant 1, Tiruchi 11, Major Royalty 3, Tiruchi 12, Brahmana 1. Page 133. Table continued. Tiruchi 12, Tevratial 2, Tiruchi 12, Major Royalty 1, Tiruchi 13, Local Chief 3, Tiruchi 13, Major Royalty 1, Tiruchi 13, Temple Metsavant 1, Tiruchi 14, blank 1, Tiruchi 14, Local Chief 1, Tiruchi 17, Major Royalty 2, Tiruchi 18, Tevratial 1, Tiruchi 18, Local Chief 1, Tirunelveli 8, Local Chief 1, Tirunelveli 12, Brahmana 1, Tirunelveli 13, Brahmana 1, Tirunelveli 18, Major Royalty 1. Total number 348. Source 5777 and VRR. Page 134. Table 2. Class/caste background of women property owners. Status number. Brahmana 28, Tevratial 50, Local Chief 79, Local Elite 8, Maid Servant 2, Major Royalty 132, Merchant 3, Military Leaders 2, Palace Metsavants 12, Religious/Hindu 2, Religious/Jain 1, Shepherd 1, Temple Maidservants 1, Temple Servant 1, Velala 2, total 327. Source 5777 and VRR. Continued in next file. Urban Property, Manchal Kani and other rights.